Josh, I think we're live on our first episode of
Crypto and Lunch.
Crypto and Lunch.
Yeah.
With,
We're going to talk about, I think, crypto.
We are going to talk about some crypto
And some lunch.
and eat some lunch. So both Josh and I are big foodies, or we just like to
Should
eat
we also talk
some
about
lunch.
Panama, or is that just irrelevant?
We happen to be in Panama for our new viewers. Yeah, you're kind of right about the mic. It's not perfect.
It's a learning process.
Yeah,
guys.
exactly. Part of what is going to be crypto and lunch is obviously we're doing this super amateur and super laid back. But hopefully people will appreciate that. So yeah, we like a lot of food. We do live in Panama City. Josh's Spanish is better than my Spanish. You can't drill on camera though.
I know, right? Because I'm on the phone.
And so yeah, we're here trying some pineapple foamy drinks and checking out a new lunch special at what was the name of the restaurant? Casa Ajena. And
It's actually my friend Sarah's family's restaurant.
did we figure out what the soup is yet?
I think it's I don't know what zapallo is. I think it's pumpkin, but I'm not 100% sure. It's some kind of squash.
It's pumpkin. That's really good, actually.
It is some good soup.
Yeah.
That's the thing is that, like I told you, economically speaking, there's no way I'm paying $9 for soup at Tacos Al Dente. Okay, it's crazy. The lunch special that comes with soup is $6.
Okay. Okay. So Josh is all about the lunch specials, which makes sense. If you're going to be buying lunch in Casco Viejo, Panama.
But it's not about the money. It's about the experience. It's about like I want soup first, then I want like a main course, and I want like a little dessert and a drink, and like the whole.
Speaking of the experience, we actually.
Yeah, the whole meal
That's
kind of
flowers.
thing. Yeah, that's nice. Nice touch. So,
Yeah, this is actually a very nice place. It's totally empty over lunch, but I guess a lot of places in Casco probably are.
I think it's because of the construction that makes it hard to find a little bit. Well, not that hard to find.
Yeah. So for all the crypto people out there who are bored of watching us just eat, not that we're not going to keep adding more food commentary as we go.
Of course, it's like a hybrid model.
Exactly, right. So, and we'll be sure to actually I was going to say we'll be sure to include quality pictures or something like that.
Well, I guess we can, like thumbnails or something like that.
Unless you're going to take out your phone and start taking pictures of the soup.
That's true. That would be gone pretty
Not that
soon.
you have to. Maybe this just works better without the picture.
Well, it's a learning process. We'll figure it out as we go.
So let's talk some crypto.
Yeah. So I think that one of the biggest stories in the kind of crypto world right now is obviously the banking situation, which has probably hit Bitfinex the hardest.
I think, yeah. Well, eventually it's kind of hitting everybody.
True.
What I find really interesting is watching the spreads between all the exchanges right now. And what I find really interesting is watching. We've seen so much value kind of come up in altcoin world. Whether it's Ripple or Dash or Ethereum or whatever.
True.
And Polo values a Bitcoin more closely to Bitfinex than it does to Kraken or Bitstamp, which I just think is really kind of interesting to watch.
But that's the thing too, is that Kraken has always been basically crypto only. So you could never really wire
Not
money.
that you could be Polonium.
Polonius, yeah. Polonius was always crypto only, so you couldn't wire any funds there. So they've already been in the situation that now Bitfinex is, and I think BTCE is as well.
Right, you just haven't had that, you haven't seen that spread before. And
yeah, it's weird though that they weren't at a different price earlier, right? How the Bitcoin price was pretty closely matched. But I think there's a lot of cross trading going on between those two platforms, Bitfinex and Poloniex. By the way, I work at Bitfinex, but all of these thoughts and opinions are just my own.
Sure, and I work at CoinVault, and all of these thoughts and opinions are still my own. Yeah, maybe. I mean, if it's our first episode, maybe we should even be introducing ourselves.
I guess that's true. My name's Josh Rossi, and I have been working in Bitcoin since I guess like maybe 2013 or something like that. I moved from New York to Panama to work at Coinvault after doing a couple of crypto projects in the United States. The most famous of which is probably Satoshi Square. But besides that, I've just been working at Bitfinex for a while now, doing some market-making activities and other things. And I've been at Bitfinex for years now, and rode through the whole hacking incident. It was pretty impressive to see that they bounced back so strongly. I got a lot of faith in those guys. I guess you can say I'm biased though.
Yeah.
But anyways, so yeah, that's me, and I live in Panama with my girlfriend Susie.
And so now it's my turn for an intro. I do live in Panama. I've been here for a few years. I moved working with Coinable, and yeah, I'm still working there and just kind of doing Bitcoin stuff while in Panama. And I don't know, it's kind of an interesting, different perspective overall, I'd say, because we're, I don't know, quite removed, I'd say, from the New York scene or the San Francisco scene.
True. I'm a little jealous of the San Francisco scene because Marshall and all those guys are always doing cool stuff, starting a Dungeons and Dragons night.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, Josh is upset we don't have enough kind of video gaming.
Or Dungeons and Dragons, it's more like a tabletop game.
Well, I guess right. It's really the overall gaming scene.
Yeah,
is
the overall
not
gaming scene, I
up
guess.
to snuff. And that's probably Pamela's similar in that regard for a lot of tech and newer stuff. We definitely see the Latin American side of technology upkeep. I remember one of the craziest things I ever saw in Panama for like tech was Uber was doing their advertising by sending people to physical malls
And handing out flyers.
and handing out flyers and like taking people's phones from their hands and downloading Uber for them. And yeah, to me that just kind of illustrated, the mentality towards tech in Panama is certainly nothing what it looks like in New York or.
Well, it's kind of like William Gibson said, is that the future's already here, it's just not evenly distributed, right?
Yeah, and I can definitely see that.
So I was going to say one interesting thing, though, about being in Panama is that we're pretty close to Venezuela, and we can actually see a completely different perspective from a currency point of view, because basically you have clear examples of what happens when a government mismanages their currency. And, there's this massive, almost like borderline, I would say, humanitarian crisis going on in Venezuela, where it's like, it's not even really possible to buy a lot of things there, all because of these crazy capital controls and other things that are going on. So I think that it's funny because this, even though it might not be as advanced technologically, I think that it has a much stronger use case for all the cryptocurrencies, which is why I've always been kind of focused on like Latin America as like, I think it actually does help people's lives here, whereas in the United States, for the most part, it's like a toy or something.
It's definitely very much like we need Bitcoin versus we would like to invest in cryptocurrencies. So it's like real hardcore users that we end up meeting and interacting with. It's a lot less of the kind of speculative day trading type of mentality. One thing that blew my mind with Coinapult was currently like the number of wallet users that we have. It's over 50, 60,000 users now.
Yeah.
And over half of our normal users are from Venezuela.
Wow.
Which is just
an
absurd number. So we do just see, if you want to make a living in Venezuela, why would you think about using a bank account to do that when you can use Bitcoin?
Yeah, exactly. Saying there's like 15,000 or so accounts in Venezuela.
It's probably for our total right now is 60K. It's probably 30K.
Wow, that's a lot of
users and people that are sending
And it's
payments.
funny too because I would say that more than likely how it works in practice is that you probably have like the son of the family who knows about it or learned about it and then helps the rest of his family. So
I think
in a
that's
sense,
probably more often the case.
in a
Right,
sense,
each
you
one of
probably
those
say
users
each one of those users is probably like supporting another maybe 4 or 5 other people by being a conduit for them into the crypto world.
So, and we, a bunch of reporters have done a lot more reporting on what the Venezuelan mining scene looks like, and that seems to really clearly be the case. Where like, if you know a Bitcoin miner, you can get whatever goods and services you need either shipped or delivered or performed. And to me, it was shocking how quickly that story. I mean, some libertarian, Reason Magazine started reporting on it, and then like 2 weeks later, Venezuela was making high-profile arrests.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, you can definitely see that trend becoming bigger and bigger because Bitcoin is not just value there; it's needed in that situation.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's what's really cool is because you actually can be making a difference for at least some people. You can make an actual difference versus just like it's really cool. Like, but don't you understand how photography works? Like, people are like, I don't really care. Like, I don't really care how Uber manages the GPS stuff. I just wish the drivers were better at getting here faster or more efficiently. But I don't really care how it works, to be honest. And I think most people feel that same way about any other app they use, where they really would rather just, you can like leave out all the details and just like, as long as it works, you know? So we finished our cream of pumpkin, right?
Yeah, that was definitely pumpkin.
Yeah.
It was quite good actually.
We've got some
Spaghetti
spaghetti bolognese.
Little bolognese now. Should be pretty good.
Yeah.
So far I'm liking this place. It's
I like
cute,
it.
it's quaint,
Nice.
it's got some nice music in the background.
I mean, it's a hobby of mine to rate lunch specials. This is a pretty good lunch special, but it's not like a great lunch special because it's not, you know what I mean? Well, I'm saying though, like, I had the taco bonetta lunch special
Yeah.
like 3 days ago.
We will try to make sure we record an episode of
Ridiculous
time.
value. Ridiculous value though. $6 with the tortilla soup, everything. So anyway, it's really good. And it's also really good food. But what was I going to say again about specifically what we were talking about? Yeah, I feel like it can make a difference. And it's funny because, in a sense, like I was telling Gabe earlier, I was reading on this blog called Wait for Live. Really cool blog, I recommend it. It kind of like touches on the whole thing of like rationality and using your mind as like a tool and, you know, making good decisions and how to think in a certain way. But anyway, the guy did a 4-piece profile on like Elon Musk and some of his companies, and it was really interesting because Elon Musk has figured out this like key that's like kind of like a force multiplier, right? Like where he plans on making like 500,000 cars a year, and his goal is actually to have like, I think, half of all new cars being sold be electric cars, right? So he obviously can't do that by only selling 5,000 cars a year when there's like a, you know, 10
Eventually,
million
other
cars.
car producers have to also make electric cars.
And they've already started because he just made it look
right.
cool.
He was putting on a lot of pressure on these companies to do so. And a lot of Bitcoin companies are doing kind of strange. Similarly,
But I don't know about that. That's what I was going to say. In the Bitcoin world, I don't see that. I don't see someone who made it cool.
I don't think it's cool yet.
So that's what I think is
But we have-
lacking.
I think to me, it's just kind of a question of time and somebody coming up with, you know, how do we make this cool. But from an incentives perspective, Bitcoin is most companies are kind of situated where if they help just even contribute a little bit to Bitcoin's overall success, then that will push everybody in the direction that we want to get. So, you know, one Bitcoin comes overwhelmingly in the space means everybody's Bitcoins are worth more. So we all have the incentive to want to try to do that. And we've seen companies all, you know, try to do that. I guess you could argue whether we've been. I mean, I don't think Bitcoin is anywhere near cool at this point.
I think we built usable stuff, and it works. But there were usable electric cars a long time before Tesla came around. They just weren't cool, and no one wanted them, right?
So what makes Bitcoin cool at this point?
Magic internet money, right?
Does it?
I don't know.
People really care in their magical internet transaction. Like, where is Bitcoin finding the most value for its users? Or like, who are the? Yeah, I don't know. Who's getting the most value out of Bitcoin right now?
It's also a lot tougher for Bitcoin because, well, I guess it's not that much different, but it's so decentralized that it's hard to really come up with like a common core message.
Yeah.
But at the same time,
It's doing a lot of different things for
I would say
different
that the same thing happened in the auto industry to some extent, where it's like there's no one, you know, message from the automakers, right? There's just different companies that are kind of like, you know, kind of just stagnant, right? Which is what I think the situation is with the banks for sure. They're stagnant, don't really innovate, like, you know.
So, for me in that regard, and it's kind of annoying to say as everybody's trying to figure out like what the killer app of Bitcoin is going to be to make it cool. I almost think in that regard, the killer app is just what it does today. You know, it just acts as digital gold and time.
Yeah. Somewhat, but I mean, like, gold isn't cool, you know? So I mean, like,
Well, it depends who you ask.
well,
Gold
of
is
course,
cool
like,
for
a
a
tiny subset of people. But I'm saying, like, to make a change in the world, you need to get most of the people in the world thinking that something's cool, and then they will be the ones who will then just like want to learn about it. You don't have to go teach them; they'll go look for it online.
Yeah,
I mean, that's happening somewhat, but I'm saying,
I think until, and maybe maybe the way I think until Bitcoin fully becomes like truly digital gold, where we can talk about it as like a world reserve asset. It's not gonna. It's not.
Why would that happen if no one makes it cool?
Because it will achieve it. I don't think gold is necessarily that cool. I don't know if I think digital gold is necessarily that cool either, but magic internet money where everybody can send these real easy, cheap payments to each other, I don't know if that happens until Bitcoin becomes kind of this world reserve digital gold asset. Right, so I'm just saying, I think we still have another 5 or 10 years of just Bitcoin proving that it's digital gold before it becomes anything near a sexy, fun, consumer magic internet money.
Well, it depends because, for example, for me, one of my favorite use cases was paying for like prepaid phone minutes on my phone, right?
Yeah, but
whereas everyone else in Panama is like, oh my gosh, it's such a hassle to like refill my phone. I have to go to the store, then get a scratch-off card, scratch it off. I have to go wait in the line, like all these things, and I'm like, it took me like 2 minutes, and I just did it right from my house, and I refilled my phone, and it was cheaper than what you just paid for. Like, it's typically with how it works out in online shopping with Bitcoin, it's like $9.97 for a $10 card or whatever. But that was to me a real use case because I think like 2/3 of the world's phones are prepaid phones, right? And being able to quickly and easily recharge your phone in any country without doing any kind of currency conversions on your own, it's pretty cool.
I think it's, yeah,
But maybe,
but you're still talking about, like really low end, and I would call it kind of low priority transactions, being nifty to do over Bitcoin. I just don't think I don't think you're going to see that. Well, actually, that's kind of not. In some respects, I think you will see a lot more of those transactions because, especially for the unbanked, it's such a that actually is it is enough of enough new value from using Bitcoin, versus using something else. Especially if you're trying to fund somebody's cell phone payment in another country.
yeah.
Then it's one thing if we're in Panama and we're paying our own Panamanian cell phone bill with Bitcoin.
Yeah.
It's kind of another thing where normally you were using Western Union or something like that to send cell phone money or cable money or whatever it was, and now to do that with Bitcoin, so I think you will see a large tick in those transactions in lesser developed markets. So I don't think the U.S. is all of a sudden going to have a huge spike.
It's hard to break into the U.S. market though, because the U.S. people are very set in their ways.
Well, and I guess you could argue reasonably so. I mean, I don't think anybody really has a lot of hassle paying their credit card,
true.
Paying for their cell phone with their credit card right now. It's pretty easy.
To the iPhone and the Tesla, right? Like, people already had cars. People already had phones. Why were those so immediately popular? And how do you flip that switch, right?
Yeah.
That's what I'm curious about is one day, no one thought they needed a smartphone. The next day, everyone thought they needed a smartphone.
It's all right. That's it. Right. Where do you flip from nobody thinking they need a Bitcoin to everybody thinking they need a Bitcoin? And I don't know if I know the answer to that even
I'm
yet.
pretty sure I don't. If I did, I'd probably be pretty rich, but
Yeah, I don't know.
I am curious about it. And that's the thing is that that's what I think that's missing is I don't think it's Elon Musk in the Bitcoin space who can actually figure out how do I make this appealing so that tomorrow everyone wants this. Because if that happens, it becomes a world reserve currency basically overnight. It becomes legitimized in the eyes of governments basically overnight.
I mean, in my mind, everybody should want some amount of Bitcoin as this digital gold, it's a mechanism for saving wealth.
Yeah, but you're definitely not an average person.
I know, but right, and so I agree with you. I know I'm a weirdo, I don't understand, but when does what is it that pushes the average person to have that thought? And I always, and I actually find this funny, if I'm talking to, a large investor or a fund or something like that, and I was talking to funds when Bitcoin was
Me too. I was talking to
$100, $200.
I was talking to Goldman Sachs traders when it was $15.
Right, and so
They just laughed at it.
Well, what blows it was one thing to laugh when it was 15,
Yeah.
but we're about to hit, we're probably not far from hitting 1,500.
Yeah, exactly.
What still surprises me is that not even just like the average dude trying to save a couple $1,000 or something like that, but the average fund manager who's, working with anywhere from 1 million to 50 million to, I don't know, a couple $1 billion in their fund,
Why not put like
they still don't think it's worth their
1%? Yeah.
right. They haven't flipped that switch yet. Where for them, it like even just owning a tiny amount. So part of my thinking is that Bitcoin just still has a lot of legwork to do on its basic properties.
Well, I think the properties are good. I just don't know if.
No, just like, in terms of selling those. No. I think Bitcoin's protocol I'm loving these days.
So what's funny is this is kind of how they. And we can get to the scaling debate in a minute too, because I actually do want to talk about that.
Well, and it's funny because I think this conversation does,
It kind of leads into that,
right. Well, and it's part of why I find myself on the small, stick to what core developers think is safe to do.
We've already seen so many big missteps by other people. Like literally, the first blockchain unlimited thing had a huge bug in it or whatever, right? Which I guess they fixed. I don't really know all the details.
Right.
But, you saw the Ethereum DAO incident, right? Like making changes has like this unseen risk to it that people don't fully appreciate, and they don't know exactly what's going to happen. So I think that especially with things like currency, you want to take it as slowly and safely as possible, because it's really all about stability. Like
it is right. It's all, and unless we get that base level of
Yeah, it just
long-term
always works,
stability. Yeah, and I think you're right. And that's why I look at people wanting to make Bitcoin sexy in the next year or two. I just don't think that there just isn't enough of that long-term stability and security. And so, right, and I was talking about like these fund managers. I don't think they're going to feel safe and secure investing in Bitcoin until number one, the market volatility is a bunch further down. But the market volatility is only going to go further down if the Bitcoin price goes up another 10x, and that's going to be the way that this discrepancy resolves
I
itself.
suppose so. I think it's kind of like I said, like the bootstrapping process, which was like this tiny little car company, which was making like even now still hasn't really released the Model 3, right? So it still is doing like less than 100,000 cars a year or something like that, right? Has completely changed the shape of what kind of cars people want, right? And that's what I mean is that it's more about the mind space of all these people in America that don't really care about it. And if there's a way to kind of like activate that, like I care about it now, that could change everything. And I just feel like it's less of like a technical problem. I think it's more of just like a sales problem, or maybe even how would you put it, like a PR problem.
Have people not? Part of what I always think might hold people back from just going from owning 0 Bitcoin to owning some Bitcoin is just they've never held a Bitcoin before and they're not comfortable with it.
That's what I was talking about earlier. Is like I really loved the InstaWallet service like way back in the day, and of course they had all of their like security stuff. It was like terrible because they had all this stuff like searchable by Google. But I don't think the concept was bad, right? And I think that is the kind of like level of usability that like makes people really comfortable with it. Where it's just like, I want to program. Oh well, just like pull up a new Bitcoin address and boom, it's done. Yeah, like no kind of like it's just like go to a website and it automatically generates one for you. And boom, you now have Bitcoin. You can store your Bitcoin, send your Bitcoin, do whatever you want with your Bitcoin. And I think that's super cool, and that's kind of like more of the service. I mean, like even the Tender wallet is pretty cool. It's like not as fun to work. It's not as fun to work with as like just like InstaWallet, which is like super dead simple.
Yeah, to me, I always like the really simple, really quick wallet. I mean, the funny thing, part of what we're talking about on usability, the big blockers will get upset about, I want to send $1 very quickly and simply, and I can't do it right away. And I sympathize with that. To me, that was a huge piece.
I think it's not gone though, because I mean, you can still do that.
They're all right. And to me, it isn't gone. There's obviously you can do tons of off-chain trade. You can do as many off-chain transactions.
I don't know, maybe Merkle loan filtering or whatever they're talking about. Like maybe some of those things also alleviate the stress, right? And I don't really think that Core has ever said we will never increase the block size, right?
Well,
Which
right,
seems
that
to me
is
to be the
also-
point of like all of these like big blockers is
they're
they're never
never
going to do it, and they
right.
never said they were never going to do it. They're just not going to.
do it right away.
They're just not going to
First-
force it or
right.
rush it
And
for
so-
no reason.
Yeah, and you and I are pretty similar on this. I think, obviously we should make blocks more efficient with SegWit before we
try
toying
to-
around with the more dangerous.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't
Option.
even think it's like a huge danger, but I just think that like so with
It's just an
anything-
unnecessary
Yeah,
risk. it seems
exactly.
like.
And that's the thing with me too is that I look at it like people are acting like it's this binary thing, but it's not. It's a
It's not,
spectrum. Like,
right.
obviously,
We
one
can-
gig
we can
blocks
do
are too
SegWit,
big,
and then-
and one bit meg might be too small.
Right.
And maybe somewhere in the middle there's the magic number, but probably each person has their own different magic number. So it really comes down to well, you can't make everyone happy.
What can we all at best
What's
agree
the
on?
what's the doing the least amount of bad or doing the most amount of good for the majority of users?
So as we're kind of talking about this, Litecoin's obviously pushing a lot of interest, and I'm loving that we get to see this experimentation going on
yeah.
another
Lightchain
chain.
has always basically looked like it was going to be Bitcoin's like testnet.
It was like a live testnet,
Yeah.
right? Bitcoin testnet had no value, but the Litecoin testnet was value on a testnet, which
Yeah.
I loved. And so they just kind of had a Litecoin roundtable. They basically, including by the way, Bitmain and Jihan and
Jihan came?
a bunch of big blockers attended and came to the conclusion that number one, we're going to pass SegWit for Litecoin. And then number two is we're going to, if blocks fill up to 50% capacity, we will then implement a block size increase,
Nice, that's a reasonable solution.
which is totally.
and what's their increase from like 1 to 2 or 1 to 4? Because
So
either
they-
one of those is reasonable.
They didn't. I'm pretty sure they didn't even specify in the agreement, but they were happy that apparently Bitmain and others were happy enough to agree that some
How does
block
it affect
size.
ASIC boost? Because that was, I thought that's supposed to be the main reason behind it all.
So I mean, it looks like Jihan will agree to SegWit on Litecoin for now. I don't think he's been. He obviously it was reported that he increased his Litecoin mining significantly as this whole SegWit debate's been raging. So you got the price of Litecoin pumping and dumping all over the place,
Yeah.
just pamping and damping everywhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, I suppose if they're actually going to endorse SegWit on Litecoin, then you would lose an ASIC boost advantage of SegWit.
Does it
Makes
ASIC
it
boost even work
incompatible.
on Litecoin?
I think somebody was looking into it,
Right.
and somebody said it was. I don't know. Yeah,
But
all
that's
I've done
what
is
I'm saying is,
consult
like,
Reddit on
I
that.
feel
so
like
I'm
the
not sure.
discussion has gotten way too dogmatic and way less about
We're-
what are we
we've now,
actually trying to
right,
do.
we've
Yeah.
now gotten very practical, which
Yeah.
is what I love.
Because
about
that's
what
the
Litecoin's
funny
doing.
thing too is that with Litecoin, it's like we don't really care what happens. You
Right,
know,
it's just
like
well,
if it just goes really badly, like we don't really care. We still have Bitcoin. That's what we're really focused on, right? So,
exactly.
so I feel like it's kind of like it takes the pressure down, so people are more willing to work towards a common ground because
Totally.
they're like, to be honest,
Totally
I really
true.
don't care what happens here. Like,
Right, exactly.
which is nice. It's like you can kind of take a step back and stop thinking like, oh no, big blocks are the only way
And
forward.
it gives people the opportunity to speculate on whether SegWit is a good thing or a bad thing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's going to
I thought that
open
was
up.
really smart by Litecoin to actually be like, oh, well, we'll do it, and then now, all of a sudden we're back at the spotlight again because Litecoin actually like dropped to like third or fourth for a while,
Oh, I'm sure it
and
was.
like all of a
further
sudden
down
it's
than
like now back up to second, I think, right? Or
It's
second or
not,
third?
no, it's not quite now because I mean Ethereum is huge these
True.
days. Ripple, I'm pretty
That doesn't count.
arguably true, but the market cap of what is questionably a blockchain seems to be higher.
I don't know. It's not even. Well, I guess maybe it's a blockchain, but I don't know because it's
It's
all
a
pre-mined.
it's a database.
I would think not count pre-mines. That's what
Which
I would
is,
think.
well, there's certainly not enough liquidity on it where
And that's the
you
thing too
would
is
say
I could
that.
pre-mine like 2 quadrillion units or something, sell one of them to you for $1, and now I could say I have a $2 quadrillion
right,
market
so-
cap.
so I-
I'm bigger than Bitcoin.
I
now.
agree. The trade, yeah, sure. And I mean, Litecoin's a big player. They're I think the
No, they are
market
pretty
cap
big.
is now hundreds of
But I'm
millions
saying that
of
like
dollars.
I would
I
say
think
that
it's a
you need a
billion.
better metric than just whatever the last trade was divided by how many of the units there are. Like you saw what happened with Zcash too. That was kind of another kind of crazy.
Well, that was the true example of. I mean,
Irrational
that got
exuberance?
pamped and damped so
Yeah,
hard.
it
That was within one day. We probably saw
like 200 to 1,200, something like that.
It was insane. It was people. It was 200, 1,200 bitcoins per Zcash.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's
it was
insane.
really. And now it's trading at like 4 bit cents or 5 bit cents.
Yeah.
Or
So that's what I think too. Is I think that like it's nice to have an ecosystem of altcoins, right?
I think
But-
it's super necessary.
No, it's cool, but I don't think.
But there's a lot of weird scams.
No.
and stuff.
Well, of course there are, but I think it's kind of the same. Even the stock market has that. You have like your blue chip stocks, and you have like your like
Your penny
small
stocks.
cap stocks, then you have like penny stocks, then you have like pink sheet stocks that your advisor will tell you never to touch. You know, like high risk, you're probably going to get scammed.
That's
That's probably what happens. But I don't think, and this is what most people in the altcoin space hate to hear, is that, oh no, eventually they're all just going to be equal. There'll be like 10 of them and they're all the same size. I don't think that's ever happening. It's kind of like saying, yeah, like how there's like, 10 cell phone operating systems and they all just coexist equally. No, there's 2 now. 2 and only 2. And no one has even managed to come close. Microsoft, which is like the 3rd or 4th biggest company in the in the US, it can't make an operating system compete with those 2, right? I don't think it's possible. And that's what I'm saying too, is I think that Bitcoin will keep its top spot. The other ones will kind of serve more niche purposes, like, for example, Litecoin can serve as kind of like the silver to Bitcoin's gold, maybe.
Sure, just test
You have
Bitcoin.
Ethereum for like decentralized application type stuff. You have maybe Monero for a small subset who really cares about privacy or something.
I'll tell you what, I think Ethereum is going to be super interesting to watch for the next few months. I'm still curious to see like a real use case.
Yeah, me neither. I'm like, the one thing I was excited about was the
Well,
Augur thing.
it's tough, and it's just so tough to ignore now that it's valued at like a $4 billion market cap. But I still don't know what it's used for.
Yeah, me neither. I don't think it's used for anything yet. But what's funny is this, right? So we were talking when we went to the beach with Parker. And I was talking with Parker about this thing. I don't remember if you heard, but it's funny because people who are like super dogmatic, it's like very clear, like the way they say things, but it automatically hits you on like almost like an emotional level, where you're like, okay, you sound like you're in a cult, like that kind of feeling.
Sure.
So like when people say something like, Kendrick Lamar went platinum with no features, like you're like, okay, I get it. You're like part of the Church of Lamar now, so no, thank you, we're good here. Like, and I feel like that's the same way that some people in Ethereum kind of have that. Maybe some people in Bitcoin probably do too, but I think that in Ethereum especially, it's like, no, but and it's so funny because I actually think that they're running into, like, I think I saw someone who was talking about it, and they're like, if you think Bitcoin has a scaling problem, just wait till you see Ethereum trying to scale, like, because of how much more complex it is and
Right.
more.
And there's a lot of costs in writing these contracts and stuff.
Exactly. So that's one of the things that I have yet to see too. Is like, well, if Bitcoin, which purposely tried to keep everything super,
Really simple to
yeah,
scale.
really simple so it can scale. It's
Let's
like
take the really
they were like,
complex
let's
things to
make it really complex, and then it'll. So I'm really curious to see how Ethereum scales, like under like a real load. With people are using.
So I'll tell you what I'm curious about. Do we get like a dessert?
Remember, I didn't see on the sign. If not, I won't order one. But
I kind of forget.
I kind of feel like the too. I can walk outside and look at the sign, but
Can't read our set.
well, yeah. I mean, are we?
This is actually a really good looking set.
Yeah, I think it is a nice set.
In terms of, it looks good.
And when we have Nicola here, it'll be even better.
It's true. We are going to try to include a female guest for our next crypto.
Should be a co-host or
crypto
she
launch.
guests? Because I'm
Oh,
not sure.
I don't know. I think we're still guests. I'm not even sure we're hosts just
Like,
yet.
who's-
It's the first episode.
Who's the host of this then?
There has to be a second episode for this. Like,
Okay.
this guy- I don't want to
Roll
get.
with it.
Yeah.
No person. ¿Tienes un exposure? Tengo flanas, la con ron y tengo uno que es uno de chocolate, 10 minutos a 12 minutos al horno. Viene con galleta molida y helada de vainilla.
Sounds like kind of Soflitos.
Yeah, I know. It's nice.
What do you want? Para mí, flan.
Okay, para mí, chocolate.
Okay.
Share, yeah. No, one chocolate, one
Chocolate,
chocolate.
chocolate y hielo.
See, yeah. So, yeah. but I
Cool. So
think-
we are.
I think that, I don't know, I don't know if it comes with the lunch special, but I wanted dessert anyway.
Oh, we're gonna find out.
Yeah. So anyways, yeah, but we do want to hear Nicola's take on it. She's a numbers girl.
Yeah, Nicola does numbers. Yeah, she also works
But
over at
it's
Coinbase.
funny
She's got an
because-
interesting female perspective on
Yeah.
the Bitcoin space.
Interesting's a generous way to put it, I think, maybe.
What's wrong with
No, I mean, it's just like, Nicola's
Perspective.
like the least socially connected person I know, maybe. Like, I'm surprised she knows who Rick and Morty is, to be honest with you.
Yeah, she's not
And
super
I think
social media oriented.
That's what I'm saying.
Apparently
I
she's
feel
going
like,
to the New York scene a little bit.
no, of course, I'm saying like I feel like something can happen in the world, and like you would never know about it if you didn't tell her. So maybe not in the Bitcoin space. I think you guys keep up to date on that stuff. But back to banking.
Back to banking, because
So
this
one of
really
the
this
things-
is a big effing question, right?
It is, because one of the things is it's kind of like, well, how do we make Bitcoin work without the support of banks, right? Because I don't know if, I think at some point it's eventually going to be like, no, we have to do this completely without any help from banks, right? Like, we're
Well-
not going to do any transactions to help us.
And in some degree, the Bitcoin space does operate in that unbanked manner. It's obviously very difficult because then you're just talking about like cash.
Yeah.
I've personally seen some pretty large Bitcoin to gold transactions happen before.
Tell me about that one. Gold to Bitcoin.
You-
Wait,
well-
was it the other way around too? No. It was gold.
Gold
Someone had
to-
gold.
yeah.
Who wanted Bitcoin.
Well, somebody had
You
gold.
didn't find
wanted
anyone who
Bitcoin.
wanted to sell their
Gold.
Bitcoin for gold.
Right.
Yeah.
So
So you
we-
had to then sell the gold
First, we
for
had to
dollars.
get cash.
Yeah.
And, we had to get Bitcoin. And by the way, watching watching gold liquidity versus Bitcoin liquidity, which is why I find this digital gold thing so interesting. It was just so much easier to like figure out how to buy and sell Bitcoin than it was to
Yeah.
buy and sell gold.
Yeah, like
Like,
if you have
the market
like
for that
you
is-
know 10 ounces of gold, it's gonna be really hard to find someone to buy that for you.
Yeah, just the interest level is
It's low.
Low. There are special groups that are very, very, very gold.
Yeah, maybe just trying to get your
anxious
ship
to
or
purchase.
something, right? He'll buy your gold from you.
But in terms, Bitcoin felt a whole bunch more liquid.
Yeah, I think so too. In fact, I would say like, so I think recently, didn't we hear about some guy who bought a house with Bitcoin, and because of something to do with the transaction, he now has like an extra like $1.5 million.
It was some BitPay transaction, and I think the price of Bitcoin at the time just happened to be very volatile.
So that's just like buying a house and getting a free Ferrari.
Yeah, or it was really just as Bitcoin holdings going up in value, I think, or maybe it was the opposite, where he sold Bitcoin at the right time and the price crashed. I forget.
Who knows? I don't know.
But I don't know. Yeah, I don't even know where we're going with this at this point.
Anyways, this is interesting to me because, so it's banking, right? Because think about it, like all those things that we're talking about, right? I want to sell Bitcoin for gold. I want to
Some Bitcoin for cash.
no, I want to buy a house with Bitcoin. All of those require a conversion to dollars, and without a bank that allows like wires,
Dollar movement.
yeah, it makes it really, really difficult, right?
So, are we gonna, as a result, and this was something I've been thinking since watching, the Bitfinex dollar issues. Basically, and actually, by the way, it's expanded beyond dollars now. It's a problem with basically, and you guys are looking for a solution for any bank right now.
Right, I think so because I think that they said that all deposits are now not enabled, so you can't deposit anything.
If dollars, if for whatever reason, U.S. dollars and U.S. correspondent banks seem to be the most difficult for working with Bitcoin and Bitcoin companies and Bitcoin exchanges. If that's the case, are we going to start seeing more and more volume in other fiats?
That's what I'm curious about. And there's two things. Is that for one thing, I'm just curious about for like a longer term perspective is how do you price something in Bitcoin? Like you know what I mean? Like if I wanted to buy a car, right? And I said I want to buy a car. Let's say I want to make a car, right? And sell a car. I want to sell it for Bitcoin. What are my Bitcoin costs, right? How do I come up with like to make a car? You say, well, the materials cost me X, so then you also have to kind of like amortize the research and development on the car as well as like marketing and stuff like that. But I come up with it costs me $20,000 to make the car, so we sell the car for $22,000, right? Okay. How could you do something like that in Bitcoin, where I could actually say it costs me X Bitcoin to make this car, so now I have to charge,
Yeah, you still
and you can't do it because.
And
I'm hoping that one day you can.
Well, there's a lot of reasons you
That's
can't
when things
do
start getting. That's when you start getting to the point where it's a global currency
Yeah,
reserve.
right, but that's still, as best as I
ways
can
out,
tell,
yeah.
it's 15 years, 10 years, 15 years.
But that's what I'm curious about because that is how you then can just say, I really don't care about what the dollar rate is anymore. Like that whole meme of Morpheus, right? I'm telling you that one day you won't have to.
Right, exactly.
So-
and there will come, I think there will come.
But in the short term, though, I'm kind of thinking that maybe Euro takes over and now the BTC USD price is less relevant.
I was actually even thinking even the yen price takes over
The yen is just such a barely used currency, though. Like
outside of Japan. I think,
yeah,
right?
like the euro is pretty much at
A
least
lot-
all of Europe.
A whole bunch, yeah, a whole
So
bunch
there's a
of
lot of people
countries.
there, yeah. Maybe even you could potentially see I don't know, I think Russia's been a little unfriendly lately towards Bitcoin, is that true?
I I hear so many different
It's
things
like
coming out of
things,
Russia,
right? Yeah.
and I haven't seen anything particularly permanent, I guess I'd say. So,
But Japan has seemed very pro Bitcoin, which is why I think that it might make sense for the yen.
well, very, very pro Bitcoin. It's to the point where they're declaring Bitcoin like a legal tender in Japan now. Which is part of why
So I wonder if
think about the yen
there's
dollar
something
more.
interesting, right? If Japan is a legal tender, if Bitcoin is now a legal tender in Japan,
Right.
could you have a bank account denominated in Bitcoin?
I think it seems like if I had to guess what banks are going to start offering that first.
I don't know if they're going to offer it. I'm saying, is it possible right now? Could a bank legally do it right now in Japan if it's a legal tender?
I imagine so. Apparently, this new rule was signed and passed. I don't know, like a couple weeks ago. I imagine it'll take them a few months to get
Yeah,
things
of
in
course.
place.
I'm just well,
But yeah, it
but-
would seem like
but
you
see where I'm
can
going with
declare
this?
Bitcoin a legal asset on banking sheet.
No, but
on
that's
balance sheet.
what I'm saying is like not even that. Like, could I open a checking account, deposit my Bitcoin in the bank? But my question is, you see where I'm going with this is, how do we change anything then? Then the bank still does fractional reserve banking using Bitcoin.
Well, you
right?
just have to demand that you get Bitcoin. I mean, that's eventually right. If you're worried about the fractional reserve,
Well, not
of
even
your
just that. I'm
assets.
just saying, like, so then you don't have control over your money. They can still stop you from sending it where they want to.
Well, so
And you could argue that that's partially the case
So-
for companies like Coinbase or anything else.
right, and that's the thing. And the way that just changes is once a bank is offering you access to, if they'll allow you to withdraw your own Bitcoin private keys, then that's how.
Because then they don't. Then what's the point of them having it? Like, because the whole thing for me
I
is
think
that
it's-
people use Coinbase because it's easier than managing your own Bitcoin private keys and setting up all the software, right? It's just like super simple. I fill out a form and then I don't have to worry about any Bitcoin related storage.
Yeah.
So they're already kind of showcasing an alternate side, which is you can control your money. Yeah, but I don't want it.
So okay, sure. So yeah, maybe it isn't all that different. I mean, maybe the major difference isn't. Maybe the major difference in Bitcoin, when Bitcoin is cool and popular and most people have some, most people still don't have custody of their own Bitcoin.
Yeah, that would be a weird scenario to play out, I think, because it's kind of like, in a way, I would love it. In a way, just to troll all the libertarians, like, ha ha ha, everyone's using Bitcoin, and it's still the same system.
Well, it probably is already the case today. What
Yeah.
percent of Bitcoin users do you
Hold
think
their own,
hold their own, like,
Well, okay,
the
it depends.
majority of
If
their
you count
private
blockchain.info users, then I would say all of them, right? Because they don't hold your keys for you.
Yeah, but I mean, if you sum up the, let's say there's 7 million people in the world that have Bitcoin.
I have
that own
no idea, to
Bitcoin.
be honest with you. I know it's more than 1 million, less than 100 million, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, if I were guessing, I'd say somewhere between 5 and 10 million. Like
Okay.
10 million seems like the out now to me. So let's say there's 5 million people that own Bitcoin. What percent of them own the majority of their own private keys versus keep them in a shared service? I bet you it's more than half that
Oh, pretty sure,
shared
yeah.
service.
So that's what's funny. Well, I think that the saving grace of this is that while people could choose to basically not be woke,
Sure.
right. People still have the option to just say like,
I
and
totally
that's
agree.
good.
I
Like,
think
okay,
just
if you
having-
guys want to keep being cheap, be cheap.
That's
But
the
we don't
thing.
have to be cheap.
Right. I think just by having the option, you kind of change the dynamics
A
of
little bit, yeah.
it, right? I mean, Coinbase has to do a lot of work. Coinbase has to do more work than the average bank to keep and maintain their customers' trust for holding
True.
their asset. Because really, Coinbase at any point in time, could have a customer say, "Hey, I need to withdraw that $1 million worth of Bitcoin," and it should be like sent. They're going to be
That's
pissed.
the thing too,
They're going to
yeah.
be pissed if it takes more than 20, 30
Yeah.
minutes.
Or at least I should be able to see the transaction on the
Right.
blockchain, even if it hasn't confirmed yet. But if it's like,
Versus
it's going to
like-
take. But no, but that's the funny thing is Coinbase did do that. They do sometimes say like, it's going to take 7 days to do
That's-
that. And you're like, what the fuck are you talking about? Why would it take 7 days?
Right, but the pressure on Coinbase to deliver in a much different way than
Than
for
a
a
bank,
bank
yeah.
to return. Versus imagine a bank handing you $1 million cash.
Well, they would do that, wouldn't they?
No, it would be
Sorry,
very.
movies.
I've seen it in a few movies. I've heard about it for some transaction, but like your average especially not without a ton of AML, KYC paperwork and stuff like that. But I don't think if you walk into an average bank, they necessarily have $1
No,
million
they probably don't
cash.
have the cash there, yeah. I think you have to arrange it with them in advance.
Yeah, it's just a totally different, the chances of a bank run versus a Bitcoin run
Oh, true. Well, I think that's what's interesting too. Is that like I was saying earlier that like when they start doing fractional reserve banking, I don't really care about that much, and I don't think it's very likely either because you can see the value on the blockchain, right? So if you create more, it's like, well, I know that they're not there. I can't. You haven't actually created more Bitcoin, so. Although not that they would necessarily have to, because it's just a number in their, ledger book, right? Because I mean, technically speaking, I could say I promise to pay
Right, I promise to pay
10
10 Bitcoin.
I promise to pay
and-
22
Whatever.
in Bitcoin in the future.
And listen, there are scamming services that are running this exactly right now, where they say, "Yeah, well, send us 100 Bitcoin a day, and we owe you 1,000 Bitcoin in 60 days."
Yeah. What's this whole OneCoin thing? It sounds like the scammiest of the scammies.
Don't make me catch you up on one.
No, I mean like just the quick and dirty details. Like,
It's just they say that they're
is it like
the
multi-level
one
marketing?
coin, the one coin to beat all the other coins.
Which I don't think anyone in crypto has actually even heard of them, really. Like, or maybe they've heard of them, but it's not like
I've heard of
it's
them.
not like Ethereum, Bitcoin, like
Ethereum
like,
has a
Ethereum
has a
that no one
public-
takes seriously.
Ethereum has a public blockchain where, like, if you wanted to look up a
Not a
transaction,
public blockchain.
right? OneCoin does
So
not
it's
have.
not a cryptocurrency then, basically.
It just depends who you ask, right? If you're,
What about one other thing?
If
What
you're
about
asking a OneCoin representative, you
Oh,
better
of course.
fucking believe that OneCoin is serious blockchain
Yeah.
cryptocurrency technology.
wait? So what about Steemit? What do you think of Steemit?
It's a steaming pile of
That's what I thought too.
It's
I
a
was
joke.
that's what I thought too. I was like, I don't know. This seems like
It's like a it's like a crappy Bitcoin tipping service, except not even tipping with Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Tipping with some alt.
And that's the funny thing too is like, so everyone who uses Steemit, like, you know who I'm talking about specifically, but
If
basically,
you wanted to use Steemit for, like Facebook posts that you were worried about being censored, maybe it makes sense in some, like, to have an uncensorable social media.
actually, I
I
was
don't
reading
think
about this.
Steemit is necessarily delivered. Like, you just
I
go
don't think
ring in a
that's-
few guys' offices and it's done.
Yeah. No, what I'm curious about more is like, I think there are other people working on this same kind of decentralization, like, kind of trend in things completely unrelated to Bitcoin. Like, for example, there's a thing called interplanetary file system.
Yeah,
Which is really cool, yeah. Which is basically like, the internet is just my laptop connected to other people's laptop, connected to other people's laptop, and everything's stored in the cloud, but it's actually a cloud of all of our laptops or computers or whatever we have. So it doesn't have to go run through some big ISP or whatever. I mean, I don't really know how they get that last mile connectivity, but I don't know. Anyway, but that's an interesting thing. I think decentralization is obviously kind of the move.
I think it's an easy fundraising move. I don't know how much we'll see that effectively comes out of it.
Yeah.
We'll find out. Should we keep recording till we get dessert? Or
I think so. I mean, how long have we been recording for?
so a while?
I mean, I'm okay with being like an hour, but my battery's getting low. Ooh, wow, really low.
4%. It's time to call the episode
All right.
before we lose this.
Yeah, you're right.
All right,
Go ahead
well,
and,
we're gonna have dessert without you guys, but we presume this has been boring enough.
yeah, this is the first episode, and
This
we're gonna tweak the format a little bit, see how it.
Yeah, we'll try. Right, we're gonna try to add a female to the cast, and
Yeah, that way she can kind of give us a little more.
come see us at our next lunch special,
Yeah.
Panama City, where we do crypto and lunch.
Yeah, exactly.